Hello and welcome to the Metal Matt Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Metal Matt, and today we're going to be looking at something that's very recent, probably the most recent thing I've ever done on the show, and that's a review of Kurt Cobain Montage of Heck. And this should be really interesting, because this is the first documentary I've ever reviewed on here, so we'll see how it goes. First couple of shout outs. Chucky's Playground, great place to be. If you haven't signed up yet, definitely sign up because it's an awesome place to be. We're talking about all kinds of stuff. So definitely check us out. And Movie Mayhem with Spanky and G, really great show as well. They talk about all kinds of movies. Great chemistry between those two and just very entertaining podcasts that they do. So definitely check it out because you will not be disappointed. It's just an awesome, awesome show. And so now we're going to be talking about Montage of Heck, Kurt Cobain Montage of Heck. And I'm really not sure how to kind of go about it because I've never really reviewed a documentary before. But this is probably one of the most intriguing and interesting documentaries I've ever seen. Now, keep in mind that honestly, I'm not a huge documentary fan. I tried some of them, can't really get into them, honestly. Like metal, heavy metal, rock, documentaries, like, I can do those fine. But even then, they don't really interest me all that much. So it's really... So it might be a little bit tough to kind of talk about it, but this was one documentary that really intrigued me and it really interested me. Because I've always been interested in Kurt Cobain, as a person, and I always thought that his life was very fascinating. And this film definitely really has you get to know Kurt, like, throughout his entire life, from the time that he was born, to talk about the city that he was born in, how it was before he was born, stuff like that. And it features interviews from Kurt's parents, his stepmother, who else? Chris Novoselic, I think that's how you pronounce it, who was the bassist for In Nirvana. It was Kurt's friend. I'm trying to think who else. Oh, Courtney Love. She's in there, Kurt's sister. I think that's all the interviewees. And one interesting thing that they did here was that the interviews don't really last that long. Like, at the very beginning of the film, there was quite a few interviews with the family, but for the most part, it doesn't really last very long. And what I really liked about it was that it was doing all these different styles, and most of it was like a story being told through all these home movies, chronicling Kurt's life, basically. It really is like you're just watching a movie, really. And it's like all these Super 8 home movies, from Kurt's childhood. And what I thought was really interesting was how Kurt kind of changed, in sort of like the second decade of his life. Like, they say that, in like the very first decade of his life, his first 10 years, he was a very happy, very energetic child. But, like, in the second decade of his life, after his parents divorced, he kind of became, he just changed into this kind of rebellious, kind of guy. And I thought that change was really interesting. And one part of the movie that really stood out to me was there was this animated portion of it, and I'm guessing it's like audio from in the interview that Kurt did way back when he was still alive. But it's like showing it's an animated portion as Kurt sort of like narrating like a portion of his life and telling all these stories. Like, he's telling this story about how, he starts telling the story about how he had to move back in with his mother because he just had nowhere else to go. Like, his dad sort of got, like, fed up with him and stuff, and so his mother was really the only a person that would accept him back, and even then, he sort of felt like she didn't want him back. And he talks about how he like turned the pot to kind of deal with it all, and it's a really interesting portion of the documentary. There's also these other animated stuff, which is real cool. And one of the coolest things about this is that it's all set to Nirvana music. Like Nirvana music just plays all throughout the documentary. And one cool thing that I really liked was they did like this animation thing, which were these really violent drawings. And I guess they were by Kurt himself when he was a child. And it's set to Scentless Apprentice, and it totally fits it. There's also another cool part where it's like these home movies are playing from Kurt's childhood, and it's set to Something in the Way. And it's just a really cool thing, you know. It's just that song really fit what was going on at the time. But the documentary just goes all throughout Kurt's life, and so it just goes all throughout Kurt's life, and then finally, and they even show like Kurt's birth certificates, and they even show his drawings that he drew when he was a child. And I'll just say this: Kurt could draw better as a child than I ever could. I've never been a good, artist in terms of drawing and illustrating and stuff. It's not my forte. But his stuff was actually pretty good, especially the fictional characters that he drew. Like he drew a couple of classic Disney characters, and Charlie Brown and all that stuff, and it's much better than I could ever do. But so that was really interesting. There's all these photos from his childhood and all throughout his life, and they end up going through the very beginnings of Nirvana. They talk about how his girlfriend, was trying to support him and stuff like that. Kind of typical early rock star stuff. And there's this other really cool illustration, really cool animation on how he described just sitting around the house and just like doing all these things on guitars and talking to microphones and stuff like that. Really interesting stuff. And the band finally hits the big time, with Nevermind. And there's this really cool portion where they show the Smells Like Teen Spirit music video, but they have some interesting cover. It's very soft, almost, not sure how to describe it, but it's very soft, almost gospel-like in a sense. And it's just really interesting to fit over that one. I've never really seen that done before. And then they talk about his stuff with Courtney Love and all that stuff, and having a child. And there's tons of home movies that Kurt and Courtney did, and it's really interesting, So they really do go into Kurt's life a lot, They really go in depth on this stuff. They reach the final kind of thing, that they do in this one is when I believe it's something from Unplugged. I'm pretty sure it's Where Did You Sleep Last Night or All Apologies. I'm not sure which one ends it. It's one of those, I'm sure. But it's like these college, and it says how Kurt kind of fell into a coma after he discovered that, after he sort of had like some type of premonition that Courtney Love was going to cheat on him. But she admits that she thought about it once, but she ended up not doing it. But and that's sort of how they end the film. They sort of end it on Kurt kind of going into a coma and then coming out of it, and then they just cut to a white text saying that Kurt Cobain committed suicide on this date that he died, and he was 27 years old. And that was something that was really disappointing to me. I really wished that they had gone more in depth on the last month of his life, because they sort of like just stopped the movie after his coma. And I do think that the last month of his life is really interesting. I kind of do wish that they delved more into that. But at the same time, I thought it was fine. I thought it ended the movie fine. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it for Kurt Cobain Montage of Heck. I hope I did a good job, reviewing the documentary. It was the first time I ever reviewed a documentary, so it was really interesting, you know. But yeah, this documentary was very interesting, very intriguing. It's about very enigmatic, human being, and one of the most enigmatic rock stars I think of the last couple of decades. And if you're a Nirvana fan, if you're a Kurt Cobain fan, if you're a Nirvana fan, hell, even if you're not a Nirvana fan, definitely go out of your way to see this. Because even if you're not a Nirvana fan, I think you will still be very intrigued by this Kurt Cobain's life. Because it's a very interesting story. And it's done so well, because it's done unlike any documentary I've ever seen, It's done via old photos, old home movies, animation. I mean, they really do, and it's a lot of animation styles too, like either cutouts or just traditional animation. They do a lot of stuff. It's unlike any documentary I've ever seen. So definitely check it out because it really does go in depth into Kurt's life from the time he was born to his teenage years, his young years, his teenage years, his years with Nirvana. Like, it really does go in depth. You really do feel like you come to get to know the guy, in the 2 hours that this movie goes on for. And you really do get to know him very well in this documentary. It's just really interesting stuff in it. And I ended up getting like a new appreciation for Kurt Cobain, And I've always appreciated Kurt Cobain. I've always respected him. I've always liked him as a musician. But his life is really interesting. I think I know a lot more about Kurt Cobain than I did going into this. And I really like that aspect of it. So if you can find it, I think it comes out on DVD this fall. But if you happen to catch it on like HBO or something, I'm not sure if they're going to replay it or not. But if you do happen to catch it, it's definitely worth 2 hours. It's about 2 hours and 10 minutes, I believe. It is worth it. It's worth 2 hours and 10 minutes to just kind of sit down and just watch the story of this really cool person. It's a very interesting story, very intriguing. I highly enjoyed it. I highly recommend it. So that's all for the Mailman Podcast, and I'll see you next time.